Is President Obama's press secretary, Robert Gibbs. Mr. Gibbs, good morning.
Good morning, Harry. How are you?
I'm pretty good. So John Boehner goes on Face the Nation with Bob Schieffer yesterday, and he says, quote, if the only option I have is to vote for some of those tax reductions, I'll vote for them. Is that a window?
Well, look, last week, Harry, the president argued pretty vociferously that we ought to extend the tax cuts that affect the middle class in this economy right now. That's what the president believes. I hope that Congressman Boehner's comments suggest a willingness to agree to the president's position. We ought not use the middle class as a political football. We ought to extend those tax cuts for the middle class. We ought to do it fairly quickly, give them some certainty, and make sure they know that they're going to get some help in tough economic times.
But, you know, there are plenty of people out there, including Peter Orszag, who was just until recently your director of Office of Management and Budget, saying there should be tax increases for nobody. Now is not the time to be increasing taxes.
Well, Harry, understand what Peter argues. Peter argues that we should extend the middle class tax cuts for 2 years and have them expire. He believes if the price of doing that is having to extend the upper end tax cuts, that's what we should do. That's not the president's position, because let's be clear, Harry, the tax cuts for the upper end, for the wealthy, which mostly go to millionaires, that's a $700 billion proposition over the next 10 years. The president does not believe that we should be borrowing $700 billion, most likely from overseas, to extend tax cuts for folks, quite frankly, that weren't asking for them and don't particularly need them.
All right, just in terms of real life here, again, Mitch McConnell comes out yesterday and says this has zero chance in the Senate from a Republican standpoint. And at the end of the day, what Americans are saying is, how does this create any new jobs?
How does what create any new jobs?
Yeah, if you're cutting taxes or any of this other stuff, I'm sitting there looking at 9.6. I need a gig.
Oh, look, there's no question we've got to get our economy even more strengthened than what we're seeing now. We've seen 8 straight months of job creation. But look, for the middle class, this economic recession didn't start 2 years ago or 2.5 years ago. It's been going on for 10 years. They've watched their wages decrease. They've wondered how they're going to pay their bills and send their kids to college. The president believes that for the middle class, it's not time to raise their taxes. It's time to cut their taxes.
Boehner also said, basically, why not just bring the budget back to about 2008 levels, and then you wouldn't even have to be having that conversation. Any way possible to shrink the government down to 2008 size and move on from there?
Well, look, the president has proposed freezing non-security discretionary spending for the next 3 years. But understand the argument that John Boehner makes. John Boehner wants to cut spending in one breath, and then without breathing, quite frankly, he wants to borrow $700 billion paid for by the middle class to give tax breaks to millionaires. The average tax break for that millionaire is $100,000. That's not what we should be doing. That doesn't make any economic sense, and it certainly lacks common sense.
And for those of you on the sidelines, if you really want to know how Mr. Gibbs and Mr. Boehner feel about each other, just go on their Twitter accounts. There you have it. Mr. Gibbs, thank you very much. Do appreciate it, sir.
Thank you, Harry.
All right.